Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Volvo 240 project. It's now April, which means winter has finally loosened its grip, the garage is starting to warm up, and it's finally time to continue the project. At the same painfully slow pace as always, of course. At this rate, Volvo might release a brand new 240 before I finish this one. But that's okay. This project has never been about rushing, it's about learning, making mistakes, fixing those mistakes, and occasionally wondering why I ever started in the first place. So let's get back into the garage and see if we can make at least a little bit of progress today. Even though the project was on hold during the winter, I wasn't completely inactive. I may have spent a lot, of time buying parts that I was convinced I'd need someday. I picked up a few performance parts for the future Volvo engine, and I also got back into something I spent way too much time on when I was younger, car audio. We'll get to those parts in a future episode. Oh, and I also accidentally stumbled across a Volvo 245. You know how it is, you go online looking for one small part and somehow you end up buying an entire car. The plan was to use it as a donor car, just in case I needed parts. It was definitely in rougher shape than my 240. The previous owner had rolled it over, which, as it turns out, isn't particularly good for the bodywork. I also bought an engine. The seller told me it was running perfectly when it was pulled from the car, which, as you'll learn with project cars, is one of the most famous sentences ever spoken. Still, it sounded like a good starting point. My plan was to rebuild it and eventually drop it into the 240. So I tore it down to see what I had actually bought. The verdict. Let's just say the seller wasn't technically lying, it probably did run at some point in history. The crankshaft bearings were worn out, the cylinders were out of round, and the engine was pretty much beyond saving. I salvaged the parts that were still usable, and the rest made a one-way trip to the recycling center. Luckily, I already had a backup plan. The engine in my newly acquired 245 actually seemed to run well. At least that was the only part of the car that didn't appear to have given up on life. While I kept making painfully slow progress on the car, I also spent far too many evenings browsing the internet for performance parts. At first, the plan was simple: build a powerful Volvo engine. Then I started adding up the prices. That's when I discovered an interesting fact. Horsepower is expensive. Very expensive. The more I looked, the more I realized I could buy an entire modern engine for less than it would cost to make an old Volvo engine produce the same power. So just like every project car on the internet, the plan changed. So I started looking for an engine that already had the power I wanted, without forcing me to sell a kidney to pay for performance parts. I was convinced that 2025 was going to be the year I'd spend countless hours in the garage working on the 240. That didn't quite happen. Instead, I somehow managed to buy another project that completely took over my entire summer. Can you guess what it was? Yep, another Volvo. Because apparently, when one unfinished Volvo isn't enough, the obvious solution is to buy a second one. I'm beginning to think my real hobby isn't fixing cars, it's collecting projects. And if you're wondering where my entire summer of 2025 disappeared to, don't worry, there'll be a video about that project too. Thankfully, that one will be a lot shorter than this Volvo 240 series, unless I accidentally buy another Volvo before I finish editing it. And just like that, 2025 has come to an end. The 240 hasn't exactly made giant leaps forward, but at least my collection of Volvo projects has. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll leave 2025 behind and hopefully spend more time fixing cars than buying them.